Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining today's webinar with the Row team and the TaxAct team. On today's call, we'll have myself. I am a senior account executive here at Row. Been here for a little bit over a year and a half, working directly with our partners. A lot of great accounting partners like the TaxAct team here today. And then I'll pass it off to Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Wynn, one of the implementation specialists here at Row, focus on firm and partner enablement. I come from a background in Big Four audit and close and financial reporting for a Fortune 500 company. So, bringing that deep technical expertise to help firms translate complex workflows into streamlined, scalable solutions on our platform.
And I'm honored to be on this panel today. I'm Miguel. I am founder and managing partner at TaxHack. And what we do is we bring Fortune 500 strategies to business of all sizes. So we're trying to bring that strategy down to the ground level and help businesses keep cash where it can be used best. That's in the company. And that means minimizing what we send over to Uncle Sam in a strategic and totally legal way.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm Ishan. Been with TaxAct for about a year now and lead the specialty tax practice with Miguel. Come from Big Four experience in tax and research and development tax credits, so deep technical expertise in that.
Awesome. Well, I'll share a little about what we're going to cover today. This is part 3, the final installment of our 3-part series, and I'm really excited to kind of bring it all together by bringing to life the tech, what that's in what Row does, and then applying an R&D filter to that. So bringing the tax credit to life and saying, hey, when we evaluate the problem that Row is solving, how do we think about that from an R&D tax credit perspective? That is going to give the viewer the kind of perspective that we take when we look at technology to see if it qualifies for the R&D tax credit. So we'll begin by going through the Row platform, and we'll talk about the R&D tax credit implications, and then we'll conclude on some key points, some key takeaways that you can implement in your business and organization right away, if not right after this webinar, and we'll open it up to Q&A for questions at the end. And before we get started, let's go to the next slide. I just want to make sure that we disclose, you can read this faster than I can go through it, that look, there's exceptions to every rule, and that exception could be you. So before you take and run with any advice here, make sure that you run it by, if it's on the credit side or tax side, run it by your professional. And in terms of getting started with Row or leveraging Row at a deeper level, you have the implementation team here to support you and help you through that. So general information, make sure you get some support as you implement it specifically for your business. Okay, so what should you learn by the end of this? So you should understand the problem that Row is solving, disjointed finance, unified. We'll talk a little bit, we'll have the team take us through a little bit of some of the features here with regards to users, with regards to data, and then we'll wrap that all in to understand how the tax code interprets that for the purposes of the tax credit. So you should have a general understanding of these 4 key things by the time we're done. And with that, let's get into the issue. So the issue that we have identified and experienced as a tax and accounting firm is that you've got a fintech stack that sometimes goes to 8, sometimes goes to 12. You have all these tools you're using. And for the longest time, the issue with working with our clients is getting those systems to talk to each other and having a team that understands all of them. So that's been the problem for the longest time. And I'd love to actually have you, Nick, talk about how that problem gets solved. How is Row's, tell me about Row's approach to disunified and unjointed finance.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to pass this one over to Emily from our team with her accounting background here, but to kind of talk a little bit about a solution to that disconnected finance stack.
Absolutely. So, Row's mission is to make finance frictionless for organizations. And the way in which we're tackling that is to have everything on a unified financial platform. By everything, I mean the main pieces that are important to businesses, which is banking, cards, bill pay, treasury options to earn yield on idle cash, and then wanting, like you said, Miguel, all of that to speak to the ERP system. So having all of that in one place and being able to have that seamless discussion between systems so that our clients and the accountants serving them feel confident in the information that's flowing into the ERP system, and it makes it easier not only to have one source of truth for all of these operations, but to be able to have greater visibility across various areas of the platform, cleaner forecasting, better expense management and visibility, which can lead to faster closes. We're able to build in some automated mapping. So helping take some of that tedious, monotonous work off the accountants on the back end. And then with real-time information becomes faster and easier decisions for our clients and for the businesses they're a part of. And part of this too, and where we're talking about R&D as well, is real-time tracking and expenses. And this can be segmented into different departments, such as R&D, which then can help them, obviously, when it comes to tax time. When we're thinking about tax credits, be prepared for those discussions.
I love that, and that's great. And I apologize because I think I missed a few key points in kind of further describing the problem. So if we can go to the slide before, I want to talk about, you've talked about the solution. I think some of the problems that we've seen is, for example, you have a client that loves the points they're getting on a specific card. They're running that credit card with a bunch of sub accounts because they're giving credit cards to their employees. And now, accountants know this, that you end up with, n+1 number of statements that need to be reconciled. And there's no way in the kind of disjointed environment, there are ways, but there's no native way to attach a receipt to a transaction without using some other platform. So now you've got a credit card, you've got the bank account, you've got the general ledger, and now you've got some other tool that is reading the receipts and connecting it to the transaction, then putting it into the general ledger software, and hopefully that all syncs. And let me tell you, sometimes it doesn't sync inside. So that's kind of the disunified of just the credit card example. So Emily, you've already talked about how Row solves that. It's one card, it flows into Row. You can work in Row to tag expenses, and then that flows into the general ledger software. So it's a really neat, I think, realization. In full disclosure, we're on Row, so we can speak to the problem that it solves. And it's great. And also, I think like the rules that we can set up as a business owner are really important. So, we have a requirement that comes from the tax code that any receipt over $75, it's really around meals, needs to include a receipt. The good news is that it's so easy to do that we actually get receipts on all transactions. So it's not just the small ones, it's the same process. People get in the habit of doing the same thing. So even if it's $3 coffee with a team member, they can go ahead and take that picture in real time when they get that. I know I get that little text as soon as that transaction goes through, take a picture of it, boom, it's uploaded. So that's been really cool. I think the other kind of issue that we deal with is that the CFO, bookkeeper, controller, what have you, isn't sometimes the best person to understand the transaction data. Now, the solve for this has historically been that you create a workflow with accountant and team so that you're learning what these transactions are. You clean it up at the end of the month, or hopefully you notice it in review. You're like, wait a minute, why is this category so high? It needs to be recategorized. But these are very delayed feedback loops in the traditional world, meaning that at year end, we're noticing that things need to be recategorized. I think what's hasn't been solved until now is that sometimes the best person is the head of sales, as an example. So our head of sales has a bunch of credit cards. They're going out to different conferences, and they aren't communicating to bookkeeping because they don't have a direct channel of what was travel versus what was like a local Uber. And that's important from a tax perspective. So I think what's really neat is that you can actually, in this world, give the salesperson user visibility to go into Row, and whether it's creating a budget or a tag, they're doing it inside of Row so that when bookkeeping comes in, they're able to compare Row with the general ledger, and sometimes create even automations that allow that to go to the right account. So it's a really, I think, neat way. I'll let you kind of come back to that, Emily, that I think the user functionality of allowing someone that's not an accountant per se, but is on the ground and understands the expenses, it's a really neat way to get them involved in the process in real time, or as close to real time as possible, which has been really tremendously helpful. Emily, I'll let you, we can go back to the slide we were just on. I'll let you kind of touch on that with the practical problem, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that, we take the pain out of traditional expense reporting. And like you said, Miguel, it's become really like a collaborative process on the Row platform. There's even a functionality within our platform to remind users to upload their receipts. So you mentioned getting that real-time text message once you swipe your card, upload your receipt, you're done. If you missed it for whatever reason, there's extra functionalities in our system as well that just helps businesses stay on top of those, and eliminate the need to, draft an email, shoot a message, and try and get that receipt. Our platform can assist in that too. I think it's really valuable. As accountants, as business owners, one of the most valuable thing we all have is time. And so what Rose really trying to do is streamline a lot of these processes, have it all in one place so that you can have that time back to then focus on the important things, which is where's your business going, getting your financials in order, and knowing that you can have confidence in your systems not only being consolidated into one platform, but talking successfully to your ERP system, eliminating that need on the back end for a lot of manual reconciling and coding, and just feeling confident and knowing that your systems are working with you to be able to set you up for success. And I think there's just so many great streamlined functions in the Row platform to help alleviate a lot of those traditional pain points that many of us, if not all of us, have experienced.
And I think it's super important. I love what you're saying because I think it's the reminder function is super important for smaller teams. Like there isn't an AP/AR kind of controller department at most of the clients that we serve. We're talking about teams that are between 5 and 25 people.
Right.
Like how in the world are you? We have to remind our CEOs like what they need to do for tax every year. They're smart people, they're focused on their business, but that reminder is a big part of what we do. And on the finance side, I love what you're saying. I actually have a text right here. You can't see it, but it says weekly summary of expenses for Centurion Group Holdco. You have 2 incomplete. So it's starting to get mad at me. And I've got a lot of things going on. It's tax season right now, but I've got a nice little link here that when I get to it after this call,
Yeah,
I
it
can
takes you right
go
to
in.
it.
Yeah, it takes me right to it. So I think it's really important to find a way. I think like the problem, if we're to kind of stay here for a second, is that it's really hard to get other members of small teams involved in the finance function. And what you guys have set up solves that because everyone's like, everyone's a node on the decision tree now. And what I'll highlight too, in terms of getting the right people on teams that aren't in finance to tag or correct or update the nature of the expense management, is like one of the user stories that we've talked about on webinar 1 was, hey, how do you do this for R&D? So we're going to revisit that. Obviously, go watch that if you haven't seen it for a more in-depth version. But yeah, one of the problems that we have as an R&D tax credit specialist is that you've got all these expenses that really should be in the R&D category that are all over the place. Maybe it's in subscriptions along with, the Harvard Business Review or MailChimp, And really, these are subscriptions that should be tagged differently. And bookkeeping controller doesn't really see that. So we talked about on webinar one, how can you do it within Row in real time? And how can you have someone that's a CTO or a VP of engineering or the software lead get their hands on you know, without creating a mess in QuickBooks. They don't want to go into QuickBooks or Xero or whatever it is they're using. So how do they do that? And for that, we'll talk about that. So Ishan, you covered this on webinar one. Tell us a little bit about some of the use case that, if I'm in engineering, like what are some of the expenses that I can be tagging, and we'll talk a little about how Row solves that.
Yeah. I think the most important thing here before I get into the specifics of what expenses are, relevant and significant and you should be tracking. The two most important things you can probably take from this so far are, the real-time data, real-time sort of tracking, and that allows for forecasting. So those are the two sort of important key factors that we want to highlight in terms of technology and bridging the gap between your accounting and tax and for tax credits as well. But the key expenses we can focus on here are typically your wages or your salary expenses that are paid to your employees, right? That's obviously tracked. Another big one for our software companies are tools. So cloud or hosting spend, whether it's AWS or Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, things of that nature should be tracked and tagged to R&D specifically. Another one are contractors and consultants. So third parties that you hire for some of that development, you can tag them in there and tag them to the R&D department or engineering, product development, whatever it might be. And the platform makes it very easy to tag and keep track of those expenses. And all that leads to is the ability to have a real-time sort of forecast of what the R&D expenses look like, what the credit may look like. Allows you to sort of set up quarterly projections, maybe mid-year projections, and that always works well with founders, with accounting and CPA companies and firms, right? It allows for that discussion in a cadence where the founder is aware of what their credit may look like, what their tax projections may look like, just from simply tracking these types of expenses in real time.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Ishan, because like I've seen it on the books. So like salaries and wages is a great example, because if you think about the old world, what you would have an accountant do is they'd have salaries and wages, which needs to tie overall to the W-3 or the payroll tax filings. And then like what are you going to do? Are you going to create another general ledger account for the R&D piece, and now you've got kind of the bookkeeper saying, well, I don't know that I want to do that. I don't know that I want to do that journal entry every month. Well, in the example that I think we showed on call one, you don't need to do that now. You can keep salaries and wages clean on the books, and you can use Row as your kind of accounting, sub-accounting tool that without affecting the main general ledger, you can now see those R&D salary wages that apply just for R&D. And like you're saying, Ishan, now you can take that number and go ahead and generate an estimated tax credit. And you can apply that to other tax strategies. So that's why I think the main point here that Ishan, you brought out that I just want to call out again is real-time tracking equals real-time tax planning. It's a fantastic use case that we started using with our clients, and we're telling our clients like, hey, you do all this in QuickBooks or Xero, but you can also maybe use a unified finance banking tool to help you do that. So we've created a lot of excitement. I think it's time to actually look at the product. So if you're watching, here it comes. And with that, Emily, I'll transition it over if you want to talk about the points before sharing.
up for success. So a few great features Rose built into the platform includes role-based access for cross-functional teams. You're able to create custom roles. So if it's for like a director position versus a manager, you're able to customize the access to different areas in the system. So very customizable on a case-by-case basis. And this just gives the business and our clients not only comfortability with the access that each member has, but controls are obviously very important. And so just making sure it's set up and running smoothly. There's also approvals and spend controls to streamline accountability across the board and also make sure that controls are in place. This can be for payments and expenses. So we talked about the $75 IRS guideline for receipts. That's a rule that you can build in. There's also, based on your company's expense policy, able to make customizable rules there too. So really just trying to cater to our clients and make sure that the system is set up in the best way for them, and every company is different. So super excited about that functionality. Accountants, CFOs, and any other member of the organization that has access and needs it is able to pull real-time reports. And with Row speaking to ERP systems, there's also, real-time reporting functionalities there as well. And then also it's just overall a collaborative audit-ready environment when companies are getting ready to file for those credits, just feeling confident in those numbers, having that audit trail, and being ready whenever they're needed to take that next step. It will take us through a demo of the platform. All right, so here's the Row platform. And on this first homepage, there's some really great like call to action features, quick action buttons, paying down any bills or paying down a card balance, transferring between accounts, depositing, creating a bill, issuing a card, or creating a vendor. This is just a great home screen for just a good snapshot of where things are at, including bank balances within the Row account across all of them. So whether it's various checking accounts, anything in a savings account, anything earning yield in treasury, and then also cash back. You're also able to see the overall credit balance. So when we're talking about R&D in these departments, this is a snapshot overall, but when we get into cards, I'm super happy to show like how we're able to split by departments. And then also just some like recent transactions. Here in cards, what's really, really exciting when we're thinking about expense management, visibility, getting, members of the organization involved to have this all like organized and set for success as well. You're able to label departments. So here you can see that Alexa Thomas's physical card is attributed to the engineering department. And this is customizable for the business. So whatever departments are applicable and important to the client, they're able to set these up and tag these cards. And you can see we even have one set up for R&D. So I like to say that this sort of tracking and organization can be really as robust and detailed as a client needs or wants. And we're thinking through what would be most helpful for them, what sets our clients up for success. It's just a really, really great feature, as well as overall card limits, which then feed into like the departments themselves. So here's like a good snapshot of what departments could look like for an organization. Like I said, you have your R&D right here. You also have IT costs, job expenses, the finance department, sales, etc. You're also able to see what members are involved in which departments. So again, just greater visibility, and I think just a really awesome way for clients and their accountants to see who's involved where, able to real time, talks about real time being able to track budgets and spend instead of on the back end saying, oh, this looks weird, we need to go in and recode. Just a great snapshot, real time to say, hey, this is looking on track. Just create an environment where it's easy, real time to go in and stay on top of the changes because there's a lot going on every single day. So just trying to make it easier to stay on top of things.
And I just want to add really quick before you move to the next one
Yeah.
is this is how a lot of businesses, clients that we know ourselves, set budgets. So like one example I know from a tech client is, things that tend to vary should be monitored. And one way to do that is to set a limit. So example I'm thinking of is AWS, especially with a lot of the AI tools that, I mean, like every business is now in the development stage with creating their own GPTs or whatever it is. And every time that API gets pulled or an action gets used, it jacks up the usage costs. So like the example I'm thinking of is like AWS. If you are going to say, hey, my expectation for AWS cost on a monthly basis is 10 grand. Well, you can figure out what a safe budget is for that. So maybe I'm okay with 1.5 that. So you set your budget to 15 grand. Well, when that limit gets hit, you're going to get a nasty gram from Amazon saying, hey, your card didn't work. Well, in a sense, that's a real time decision point for you to come in. Yeah, you're going to pay that. But it also gives you a point to say, hey, wait, so maybe something's wrong. Maybe some API is getting called too much. So it gives you kind of a real time action item that, if everything's fine, you just adjust that limit going forward, but maybe it's not. And maybe you've got to go back to AWS or stop some kind of open API that you've got going on to fix that. And okay, fine, maybe you adjust it for that month, but the next month, you make sure that whatever is causing that spike doesn't happen again. So I just love that, for those that are going to listen to this and aren't looking at their screen, what you're essentially seeing is a by department limit on specific cards that get mapped to the department. Really, really cool feature, Emily. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks, Miguel. And yeah, this is just a great like visibility tool. And then also speaking of limits and vendors, Row just rolled out a vendors card feature, and you're able to assign cards to vendors that you can then set limits. So just another great way to give comfortability and security to our clients. So, if they get charged 10 grand a month for AWS, they could set a yearly limit on a vendor card to only pay AWS, and the max for the year is $120,000. And again, if you get that email saying, hey, it didn't work, and you realize you're being overcharged, just a great like call to action. And the limit can always be adjusted. So there's no problem going in and getting that, readjust to be able to pay. But just a lot of like control pieces in place that I think helps bring not only comfortability to clients, confidence in how things are flowing, but also greater visibility across the board, like you're saying, Miguel. So appreciate it. Another great piece too, when it comes to tracking expenses in our platform, is our labels features. We see labels used for things like projects, specific areas within departments. So again, just another more robust, detailed tracking for expenses. Again, this isn't like a hard like limit on how much could be spent on this label, but more so just a visibility tool so that you can track spend by what might be more helpful to you, whether that's at a project level or a vendor level, whatever that may be. Got our great dashboard. We talked a lot about getting prompted for receipts, and here's a couple easy ways to send receipts through our platform. On top of those automated messages you're already getting prompting you to upload your receipt to the transaction, you're able to see in this dashboard what's not ready, and that's due to missing a receipt or a note. And then if I'm like, hey, we need Alexa's receipt, here's where you can go in and remind that user to upload. So it's really easy to come in here and streamline some of these tasks that are traditionally a little more monotonous, tedious, and just give that time back to the clients and accountants using our platform. You're also able to see what's out of policy, so you can real time work through anything that wasn't, included in your expense policy that needs to be addressed. So you don't have to go through every single transaction, because as we know, it's really easy to get lost in the weeds. So just a great call out here. And also love our reimbursement feature as well. Super easy to reimburse employees for mileage or out of pocket expenses. And we make this process like seamless and easy as well. And the last piece I really wanted to focus on too is our revamped accounting dashboard. This is going to have all of your transactions across banking, cards, and bill pay. And so it's just like a one-stop shop to see, especially for our accountants out there, everything going on in the account across those three main areas of the platform, as well as any additional information for them and even mapping to the ERP system. So what QuickBooks account is it going to? What customer or vendors is it associated with? And like we were discussing, what department? Is it in R&D? Is it IT? Is it finance? So just again, creating an easier snapshot of what's happening, the activity in the company, and then being able to sync and push that over to your ERP system so that you're confident that your information is coded correctly and can take that tedious coding off their plate on the back end, which is really nice.
Awesome. And you don't need to show it, but I think another one that we were curious about was the real-time AP automation. Can you just
With our
kind
bill
of consider?
pay, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I can talk through it real quick if that would be helpful.
that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So something I also loved about our bill pay feature is the two-way communication between Row and the ERP system. So first, this button up here, if a bill gets uploaded to QuickBooks, but you're paying it, settling it in Row, you're afraid of risking a duplicate. You don't have to be afraid because you can sync that bill from QuickBooks, so it'll pull into Row, so you don't have to go through the tasks of uploading it again. If it's a new bill and it's not uploaded in QuickBooks or Row yet, you're able to email it to an AP inbox or add it. And we have an ocular scanner that reads the information and will give you a confidence score and how it's populated. And then from there, based on your payment approval rules within the system, once the bills are ready to go, they're approved, you can schedule payments and issue those out. And then that will interface with QuickBooks and push the bill and all the information into your ERP system. You're able to do bill splits by line items. So let's say you get an invoice and it has multiple items that need to be coded to different accounts in different departments. You can split the invoice as well, and you're able to make sure that those specific expense items are being dropped in the correct accounts and departments on the ERP system side. And the ERP system can read that it was a bill split in Row and will populate it accordingly. So really, really great features here as well. Again, trying to automate a lot of what used to be manual and tedious and just making it more streamlined and easier for our clients to get their bills paid and book those payables on the ERP system side.
I know, I think that's great. And I recently learned I I had a vendor that would email me invoices and I would just manually go to like the vendor tab and enter in the invoice and upload the invoice. Well, I
Yeah.
realized that I could just forward that email to the bill pay email and then it would show up in here. So it saved me a step. I thought that was great.
Yeah, just trying to make it easier. Again, trying to make finance frictionless. So yeah, it's a really great capability that our platform has to make the lives easier for our clients and their accountants.
Fantastic. And Emily, did you have another feature? I know I stopped you when you were on, I
No,
think
you're
maybe some of the
fine.
coding.
I think, oh yeah, we do have our mapping rules. I can go ahead and show those quick. This will be the last piece for our live demo here, but like to show that for accounting in our ERP systems and the way they interact, you're able to control where you want transactions to go. So we have default ledgers. So any activity that doesn't abide to rules or advanced mapping rules will fall into these buckets. So good control for accountants, knowing exactly where those items would flow in on the GL. And then also rules. So you can do row vendors to QuickBook vendors, row accounts to QuickBook accounts, labels to customers, etc. So again, just really as robust and detailed as a client wants, which just really helps when it comes to expense tracking management and ensuring that the GL is up to date. You can also create more advanced rules too when it comes to certain vendors, merchants, etc. So a lot of great capabilities here as well. Could go on and on about our platform and how exciting it is, but I will end it with mapping rules.
No, it is helpful, and I think it's also important to call out that you don't have to map out everything you're tracking in row.
Right.
I think as accountants, sometimes when we have these disjointed other tools, it automatically creates a clearing account or things. So like I think what's neat is that, whether you're a finance team or an accountant, you can basically track things in row that don't need to hit a different, account in your QuickBooks or Zero. You can have a system where some things stay the way that they typically get done, and then you track them separately in row because you want to maybe track the budget. But obviously, as you were sharing, you can also have it automatically go to a specific account, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. So thank you, Emily. I think with that, we wanted to, if we can go back to kind of what we heard. What we do as an R&D tax credit team is when we work with our clients that are developing a product is we sit through a demo, we understand the product roadmap, we start with what the problem is that you're solving, and then what we do is we essentially, in our own way, map those into specific projects. So what we try and do is we say, hey, every year, when you claim the tax credit, the IRS wants to know the business components, effectively, like what projects did you work on? That's going to be driven by key features. So we did that as we were looking at the product, as we were listening to you. We're kind of demoing how we work as an R&D tax credit team, and we came out with 5 kind of core features that we would highlight for the purposes of the tax credit. And you can see here the ones that we've decided qualify. Sometimes there are things that don't qualify. I think a lot of bug fixing, maintenance, things that are purely design, like changing a color, that's not going to qualify. But the neat thing here is that there's so many features that Row has rolled out that are innovative, that solve a problem, that do it differently than off-the-shelf solutions and competitors, that actually a lot of this stuff, because it's unique, maybe it's similar, but because it's unique in how Row has developed it, qualify for the tax credit. So you can probably read them here, but everything from the UX, the look and feel, to the actual integrations and making sure that the data flows correctly, those are all from an R&D tax credit perspective going to be qualifying activities. Integrations, even things that I'll just say, like in a no-code environment, if we were talking about another product where you've got data from different buckets that are triggering a sequence of events that then give you a dashboard, things like that still qualify. So, Ro, you guys set the bar pretty high on developing features. I would say the good news is that that's the kind of stuff the IRS and tax credit specialists like us love to see. So Ro definitely qualifies for the tax credit. On the next slide, we actually show our software so that we can do a quick demo of how we would group that. And in short, I'll kick it over to you, Sean. What we're doing is we're taking those features and then lumping them into qualifying projects that we present here. So, Sean, with that, take us through how you would take Row through the tax credit process.
Yeah, awesome. So the first step we like to start with are the projects, and figuring out and really sort of getting into the details of what Row is working on in the tax year, what sort of features were rolled out. We saw a couple examples of what qualifies, but here is where we would document those, go through some of the project details with technical specialists, figure out and make sure that the project meets the criteria of the credit, and then gather some of these additional details like you see here, some of the technologies worked on, who worked on them. And here you see 2 examples of projects, one which is a mobile app. So, take it like a Row mobile app with AI capabilities and real-time data syncing, some of which we saw in the demo. And then the second one is a new web page or a new web design. The dashboard that Emily shared with us obviously has real-time data syncing capabilities. I'm sure there's some AI involved as well. So Those are just two examples of projects that, we document how we would document them and then sort of where we kick off. And then our job as the tax credit specialist or to review these projects, make sure they qualify and meet the criteria so that we can take those expenses that we may have tagged to these projects or tagged to R&D in the Row platform and make sure we can include those for the credit.
So had we been engaged by Row, we're still available, guys. What we would do is we would break out each feature within one of those projects. So it could be that we had 5 features. Maybe when you look at the roadmap of what's been developed in tax year 24, there's like 100. And what we're typically doing is we're grouping those into projects. So maybe one project would just be UX, UI improvements in 24, and then the description would include all those functions. Similarly, if we wanted to say the treasury platform was something that launched in 24, then that would be its own project, and we would have all the things that went in. And then technologies is essentially your tech stack. So the IRS says, hey, there's a requirement, there's got to be science involved. We check that box by including what the tech stack is. So what you would imagine here is a full list of all the projects, and then whether we accepted or rejected them. On the previous slide, we said qualifies, it's the same thing as accepted. And then once we do that, you can see it's step 1 in our process. We move on to the surveys. Sean, quickly touch on that. I think we're short on time, so you're going to have to paint the picture on this next slide of what we end up getting when we do those time-based surveys.
Yeah, so the time-based survey is the most important part of the R&D tax credit, right? It's the way we quantify how much time a person, a contractor, or your cloud or hosting spend is, attributed to R&D. We go through these surveys. It take, anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes for each individual or vendor. It helps us determine the percentage of time that each line item or individual spends on R&D. And then that's how we end up calculating the credit, right? So if you think about at high level, you start with tagging your expenses, categorize them properly from the very beginning. That way, when we go through these surveys, we can attribute the correct expenses to the person or the third-party vendor or even the cloud platform. That makes it very easy to go through an analysis like this. And so you can sort of see how that comes all the way down to this survey that we need to complete for the credit. This is the greatest form of support for the R&D tax credit, so it's extremely important. And it doesn't take long, but it helps us calculate the credit as well as it's the best form of support that we can create. And I think it's probably easier to see now how the expensing and the tracking of the spend during the year sort of translates into making this very efficient and streamlined.
Yeah, so I'll just share, and for those that want more details on that, we covered that in part 1 of the series. But essentially, R&D salaries may be 100%. Sorry, engineering salaries may be 100% R&D. What we're essentially figuring out is, okay, if you've got an engineer, what percentage of their time each engineer was on the projects that qualify for 24? Maybe 20% of their time is on bug fixing, maybe 10% of the time is, just general customer support. I'm not sure. And then from that, we end up with a qualifying percentage that gets applied to their salaries. So what Sean, you're pointing out is that we're getting percentages by category, whether it's salaries, contractors, or, for example, percentage of AWS, how much of that is supporting the core product versus dedicated to the new features. Those are the things that we're figuring out here, and that gives us ultimately a R&D credit base from which the credit comes. So giving you a little flavor of kind of what the process is from the Row perspective, we would send these surveys to every Row engineer. 8 minutes of their time would essentially help generate the tax credit. And then you think about like the C-suite. I'll just quickly comment on that. C-suite is all over the place, but they've got the highest salaries typically. So even getting 10 to 20% of a CEO's time who is helping drive the vision of the product, if they do qualifying activities, we're now able to pick up 10% of their time. So it's a really neat process that we've created software around to make sure that we're getting as much of a benefit as physically possible. So thanks for that, Ishan. I think with that, we'll bring ourselves forward, try and get to some conclusions. Emily, tell us what we've seen today.
Yeah, so when comparing Row versus traditional finance tools, you see like a modern UX, I think an intuitive design in our platform, automation built in when we're discussing like ocular scanners, AI, the integrations with our ERP systems versus more disparate legacy systems where you have a lot of different points of sources of truth and points of information. Having everything integrated on Row, again, eliminating the disparate systems, having an all-in-one platform for banking, spend, and treasury options, fast onboarding, and no code rules for Row. It's really quick to get up and running our platform. You have support every step of the way on our side, and just making it easier for our users to use banking, spend, treasury, etc. on our platform. Real-time ERP system syncs. This helps with close, also tax prep when we're talking about tracking expenses by departments, projects, etc. And then just great tool for like we want scale with our clients, but it's a big company tool for startup budgets, no fee platform. Um, just able to be used for clients that want to, be able to focus on their operations, focus on the mission and vision of their company, and we want to scale and support them every step of the way.
That's wonderful. Thank you for Ishan, Emily, and Nick for taking us through the problem. Let's conclude here, the problem and solution. So I'll just recap a little bit what we've talked about. And I think that, if there's kind of like a major takeaway on what the problem is that there's a disconnection in terms of your finance stack right now. 8 tools to solve, 8 different problems is a lot harder to manage than running a system through one. And there's still, I think that every team, has to learn to use a technology to map the way they work and not the other way around. So there's still a process in learning that, and what I would say is that the time to developing that process in Row is way shorter. So if there's anything to kind of take away, it's that. And I think the other part of the problem that stands out is that there's a disconnection between the finance operation and the core members of the team. I talked about the sales typically doesn't go into QuickBooks. Your VP of engineering doesn't go into Xero or whatever the general ledger is. So the connection of that is really important. The one-stop shop approach is, I think, we've shown very effective. And the second point I'll touch on quickly is that the feedback loop and the time to close is really important. I think one of the fundamental beliefs I have as an advisor is that the longer there's a delay, whether it's closing the books or whether it's filing the tax return, is the harder it is to kind of connect how day-to-day operations and day-to-day finance affects the overall strategy. So closing that in any way possible should be the objective of any startup. That is, knowing where your numbers are faster than usual, and knowing where your tax numbers are as fast as you can is really critical. And we really appreciate partners that help our clients. We're serving the same demographics, small businesses. Our mission is to provide Fortune 500 strategies, business of all sizes, and we're really grateful that Row does that. And the second component of what we've covered today is how R&D interprets technology. So that was a little flavor that we got sprinkled out throughout the presentation. We work with founders to understand their product, their roadmap, and then translate that in a frictionless way. I'm going to borrow that from y'all to generate a tax credit, because ultimately what we want to do is keep money in the business. So even if you aren't profitable, we talked about it in call number 1, there's a way to get a tax credit against employer taxes. So if you're running payroll and you're not profitable, don't think, hey, I don't have a tax bill. You do. It's coming out in payroll taxes, and the R&D tax credit is a way to get that back. So really, I think important tax strategy for any business that's involved in tech and development, even if you're not a fully fledged SaaS company. If you're developing solutions that help make you efficient and it's in a unique way that's not off the shelf, come talk to us. So how do you learn more and how do you actually take some steps? Well, number one, if you are not a current Row user, or even if you are and you want to go deeper and learn more about the product, we've listed Nick's emails here. So this is a educational call where we want a human to be the next step. So no forms, no QR. Well, there is a QR code, but it's going to take an email. But no forms, just an email there to connect with Nick. Nick, do you want to say anything there really quick?
Yeah, of course. Well, you said that like the human touch, that isn't just the first step. That's kind of part of it. The whole journey here at Row. We want to be here as you mentioned, like an advisor. We want to be here as a partner to the business as well, making sure that people feel comfortable and confident working within the Row platform. And then just want to like take it back one step as well. Row at its core is a bank account and a corporate card. So for almost every single business, we can find a use case as to how to work Row into their current finance stack and try to improve kind of that process that they're currently going in, whether that is with the R&D tax credit or just kind of creating a more efficient process when it comes to closing the books in tandem with somebody like TaxHack.
You said it best. And then punchline two, I kind of said it up front. If you're not claiming the R&D tax credit or you feel like you're underserved on the R&D tax credit, it could be bigger. It's starting to grow. Feel free to connect with us. So Ashton is our onboard specialist. His email is right there. You can reach out to him directly to get that process started. No sale, can be a completely educational call. We want to be here to support you. Well, with that, thanks everybody. I think now we can field the questions.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions come in here. Seems like a couple for Miguel and a couple for Emily. The first one being, what sets Row apart from traditional finance tools?
Yeah. So Row mainly is differentiated by being an all-in-one platform for cash and spend management. So we talked a lot about how traditional finance tools are more disparate. There's different sources of information. So Row's all-in-one for checking, savings, treasury, corporate cards, cash back, expense management, bill pay, and then it all integrating with your ERP system. On top of that, we also have good security with our partner bank, Webster Bank. It's a top 40 bank, 100 plus years in business, SEC regulated. Service, as Nick talked about, having dedicated points of contact for each account and partner, including 24/7, 365 live support. So making banking personal because it is, and wanting to be there for the businesses who need our support. And then also yield, having best yield in the market with our treasury offerings right now up to 4.4%, up to 2% cash back on cards. So just really here to help support our clients and again, supporting them as they scale and grow.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Um, and then the next one for the tax act team, how do I know if my business is too small for an R&D tax credit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on that quickly, and just to say that I think no credit is too small is part of my philosophy. I mean, even if it's $2,000, and you like to pay money to the IRS, I like to tell our clients to visualize writing a check, writing out $2,000 and sending it to the IRS. And if that feels fine to you, then we've got other problems, right? So for us, like in terms of an ROI decision, I would say, working with a tax firm, you're typically gonna start getting ROI when you've got a tax credit of, working with a firm. I would say a $5,000 to $10,000 credit. So that's 50,000 in dev spend. So if you've got a full-time engineer, you're there. If you pay yourself as a CEO, you're getting there. So I think even if you're, on the smaller end, at least looking at what a credit estimate might be isn't going to hurt you, because then you'll lock in kind of a way to think about what that credit's going to be as it grows. Sean, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think there's a credit too small, especially, I think it really depends on what matters to you most, or what that, what number gets the ball rolling for you or moves the needle, I think. So yeah, I don't think there's a credit too small. I think it's just totally dependent on what's best for the client and what they, what they like.
And if they
Right?
don't like paying more taxes than they need to.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Um, all right, Emily, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how does Row manage roles for cross-functional teams?
Yeah, so big piece is the role-based access for cross-functional teams. So the platform can support creating customized roles based on what level the employee is at and what they should or should not have access to. There's an unlimited amount of roles, so you can create it for like department owners so they can only see um, items related to their specific department, but not overall company. Obviously, accountants, anyone in the finance department would need to have that full picture. So being able to put those in place, as well as approval and spend controls, like we were talking about, above a certain threshold, having to go through an approval process, having the appropriate audit trail and documentation with receipts. So a lot of control features in there that makes it easier not only for visibility cross-functionally, but also just having everyone do their part to make sure things are documented and visibility to keep things on track as well.
Right? And we got two questions left and about 2 minutes left here. So the first one is, in what ways does R&D tax credit help my business?
Yeah, so there's two. I'll answer that by saying, look, there's two ways to claim the credit. One is, if you are profitable, you can take it against income taxes. So that tax bill that you have to pay to the IRS, whether you pay it quarterly or end of the year, if it's $50,000, and your tax credit is $60,000, in some cases that's refundable. So you're going to get $10,000 back, or if your credit's 40,000, then the net owed, instead of writing $50,000 check, you write a $10,000 check. And the other way is to take it against payroll. So right now, if you run $100,000 worth of pay, depending on benefits, with taxes and everything, like, that more comes out of your bank account than that 100K salary payment, right? A lot of that is employment taxes. So you get that refunded back. So again, this is about getting cash back in the business. And it's a super important part, I think, of every small business tax strategy.
Awesome. And then last one, this is going to kind of tie back into that question, and I can answer it. What advice would Row give to early stage fintechs using the R&D tax credit to extend their runway? Uh, I think our advice would be to look into it with your accountant. Hopefully it's the tax act team. But like what Miguel just said, is putting money right back into the business. So reinvesting in the business, whether that is moving money into a Row treasury account, um, hiring more members of the team, growing, scaling, whatever it is that makes the most sense for your business, we would suggest kind of looking into the R&D tax credit with your accountant, so you can start taking advantage of that credit or the refund.
Thanks, Nick, for taking that for us. That's great. All right, Nick, wrap us up.
Awesome. Well, right here, two QR codes. This is going to be the only non-personal touch, I promise. But these are both links to my calendar and to Ashton's calendar. Whether you'd like to talk next steps on the Row end of things or the tax hack, we'd be happy to have a conversation. And then ultimately, hopefully, get you guys set up, get you starting to take advantage of that R&D tax credit. But thank you everybody for joining today. know is an hour out of your day, but really appreciate all the people who attended and everybody who's watching this via recording as well. And thank you to our panelists, Miguel, Emily, and Ishan.
Thank you. It's great seeing you guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.